some interesting price action. We had another draw. When we came at you yesterday, we were in the midst of a recovery from the drop overnight on Tuesday night, and we are coming at you pretty much the exact same after a drop over Wednesday night. So what happened? But let's start. We're looking at Bitcoin. So, on the 4th, we rose up to 20.4, all the way as high as, nearly 20.5, couldn't break it. We popped back down, started to form, the beginnings of a range, kind of looked like an ascending triangle here. We ended up breaking down through that overnight. And now we are kind of stuck in what is perceived as a range bound scenario. So let's let this load up and stop being so wonky. So here we can see this downtrend that's been valid since November of 2021. We are firmly above it. We did have, we did have a potential chance to deviate through that trend, but we are still above it. You can see how it touched yesterday, and now the 50-day moving average and 200-day moving average, 100-day moving average and 200-day moving average, slowly creeping higher, while Bitcoin slowly creeping lower, but still, of course, in this range. And of course, we define the range with multiple touch points. As we can see here, we are back where we were trading in that bar to late September. But obviously, we're holding steady, but not looking as pretty as you would want. We don't have much confirmed bull divergence. I've kind of drawn this. We were, if this wick had closed as low as it was, we might have actually formed some bullish divergence there, but we don't have anything firmly bullish in the cards other than, a slightly strong buy candle on this hourly. Nothing entirely convincing, but of course, still above the POC at 19.95, still above the range around 19.8. And my thought is, if we can stay above 19.95, there's a strong chance to climb back at least and try and and figure out what's going on with this VWAP at 20.1, 20.2, hopefully flip that POC. So we're not in any position where, anyone should be confident in any type of trade, but it does look like Bitcoin is going to try and recover here. So let's check out what equities are doing, as that is more or less our weather vane. Very similarly to Bitcoin, despite not trading as high as Bitcoin did on the 28th, very similar in terms of being range bound. Nearly the same exact formation as Bitcoin, obviously some minor changes, but, boost to the top, back to the lower end of the range, boost to the top. Now we are back to the lower end of the range, and we could probably draw actually a mini range right here. And this is kind of technically deviation below that range. So if we can stay above 3750 for S&P 500 futures, then we have a solid opportunity to tackle 3800 again, and potentially pop back above that. So looking at sentiment, we can see Bitcoin, has come off its highs greatly since we spoke yesterday, but is still in the bullish territory, bouncing off of the 60 support level that we've seen act as resistance previously. And of course, 60 is the level that is, firmly bullish, and, whereas between 41 and 59 is technically neutral. So looking at ETH, we're still stuck in, very neutral to bearish formation. Again, checking tweet volume down 25% on average, while Bitcoin is up 2% on average. So, it does make sense that Ethereum sentiment is in more or less a holding pattern right now. Looking at hourly sentiment, definitely some pickup here. So, wouldn't be shocked to see some recovery happening, in relation to the price action we just discussed. So that's good to see. And then for Bitcoin, it was definitely down in the doldrums, definitely a little bit weak. This could signal potentially Bitcoin coming back down a little bit before it heads higher. But of course, we're still hanging out in the neutral to bullish area. There could be an inverse head and shoulders here, left shoulder, head, right shoulder. Inverse head and shoulders typically bullish, as you can see here. Also in a little double bottom, typically pushes bullish. So we have an inverse head and shoulder. We have an exact one here. We could be forming a larger one if you look at the wider view of the hourly candles. So back to Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and check out a larger time frame. So we can see here, this honestly, in my opinion, if you see a 4-hour chart looking like this, where you've got a range and it's just consolidating here with, technically we have a double top here, but technically we could also form a double bottom here and then buck that trend and head higher. Technically, we do have 4-hour bullish divergence forming. This is rising higher while this is rising lower or heading lower. So although we don't have anything on the hourly, we do have something on the daily or on the 4-hour. And of course, stock RSI down here does look to be resetting in some way, shape, or form, which definitely gives credence to a potential move higher. I don't exactly want to fade this yet until I see Bitcoin sentiment bearish, or we get some sort of market making news headline that'll really push things in either direction. Of course, equities, don't look extremely strong right now, but we are seeing very similar. We have a slight rise in price action here. We have a slight dip in RSI there. We have a nice wick on the 4-hour here. And of course, look where it's above, it's above that 37. Well, we really wanted to close above 37.50. So if we can get a 4-hour close above this POC, that's even better. So when does this 4-hour close? It closes at 11 p.m. my time. So 53 minutes. This 4-hour closes. If we can get a close above 37.60, that could potentially be quite bullish for risk assets. As you can see here, stock RSIs also reset. And we are trending in a bullish direction with what you would expect as some consolidation here, and then potentially move higher. So that's really what we would like to see. Of course, if we close below 37.60, then we need to continue to monitor 37.50. If we end up heading below 37.50, then I would expect 37.20 to act as supports. And then of course you've got this. This is actually kind of forming what you would expect to be a bullish cross for the 100-day moving average and the 50-day moving average. So you could see something front run. Typically, if this ends up looking like it wants to form something, it'll end up front running the move. So if you think this is bullish and it's going to, and the 100-day moving average is going to cross the 50-day moving average, then you should probably try and attack that trade prior to that happening. If you're still bearish, then it should end up coming back down and bucking the trend higher. So, of course, we've got our key levels that we look at for, defining price action. But of course, we've got, a nice potential bullish pattern happening or forming that is typically seen as a front run opportunity, as you'll see here. So what happened here is we broke, everyone thought that we were going to break higher. We were starting to form that. And of course, it completely ruined the trend and headed back down, which is completely plausible here. But given that we seem to be in a much better technical territory than this last scenario in September. So in my opinion, this is probably an opportunity to front run, but of course we need to close above our levels and monitor the other levels. So if we don't close above 37.60, then we need to monitor 37.50. If we do close above 37.60, then that may be a good opportunity to go ahead and try and front run that trade. So that's just an idea, but of course, looking deeper at Bitcoin, not exactly the best formation in the world. What we want to see is this crack back up here, consolidate here, and then move higher for a potential ascending wedge or ascending triangle pattern. But we could equally, head back down to the recent lows, 19.9, and then head higher as well. That would not be out of character for Bitcoin. And of course, if we start heading below 1860, we could deviate again like we did here. So you could look for something like that. If not, then we're headed back down to the range, which would be 19.4 would need to be held for continuation. We also have some liquidity here because we traded in this range for nearly 12 hours yesterday, over 12 hours yesterday. So we could definitely stop the downpour here, but obviously you've got a lot of most liquidity sitting here around 19.2. So looking at ETH, of course, very similar in the grand scheme of things. Definitely some bullish divergence here, though. At least technically it's already played out, but if this RSI ends up coming back down to here, it could still play again. So that's something to consider. Looking at the 4-hour, we should see some no bullish divergence on ETH 4-hour, which is very interesting to see, but not the worst RSI pattern in the world. As you can see, it may end up holding this, and we love our RSI pattern. So if it ends up holding this area, then it should head higher. which would bring that higher. And I think, you know, a lot of people are probably looking at this, I think wherever this 200-day moving average, if we end up heading higher, wherever this 200-day moving average is probably going to be the resistance. Based on the range, you know, 1410, 1420 would be initial resistance, and then 1460 would be next, but we'll probably end up finding a happy medium depending on where that 200-day moving average is if we end up heading higher. So, and then of course, if we end up heading lower, you know, we would want to see that trend break on the RSI, and I'll zoom in a little bit to give better levels. If we end up heading lower, then, you know, of course, we want to hold here, you know, 1350 first. Then we have this liquidity level here, which is 1328. So maybe not exactly that liquidity level, or where I pointed out, we want it right here. What am I doing? I'm sorry. I'm getting confused by all these buttons. So if we fall here, we're probably destined to come back down here, which is where the liquidity level is. Of course, it could rise higher. We could see something around, you know, 1340. But, you know, I have a feeling this is going to be an interesting range. We'll probably continue to slap around here heading into tomorrow. We do have a jobs report tomorrow. So in terms of the unemployment rate, we have non-farm payroll. So basically we want those to lower, and we want unemployment rate to increase. Previous month was 3.7%. This month expected is 3.7%. So if it's above 3.7%, that's good. Markets will likely rally. If it's below 3.7%, markets will probably fall. If it's at 3.7%, you know, I think neutral to bullish. But we definitely want it above 3.7% for bullish continuation, in my opinion, because we're still on the bad news is good news section of the market. So there we go. Look at Bitcoin trying to pull a little recovery here. We wanted this it to continue higher, consolidate here, and then move higher. So that's the ideal scenario. I'm glad to see it moving in that direction. Of course, anything could happen, but we know the levels. We know where we want to head based on S&P 500. We know what sentiment looks like. So time to cross the fingers, place the trades, and look to make some money. So I will say, you know, not a bad place to get long was down here. Of course, if you're longing here, you're kind of losing out on some value, but you know, you could play a tight stop and try and attack at least this POC, flip that, and then move higher. And that could be a trade where we tag the top of the range. You know, and that's, you know, if you did trade that, if that was a successful trade, you know, that would be 1.5%, not a bad day. But of course, nothing is guaranteed. Doesn't mean we're going to break above this. We need to, of course, rely on a strong 4-hour close from the S&P 500. We need to root for above 3760. So I'll be tracking that. And of course, you know, if you don't trade at the open, great time to trade is at the daily close. Of course, we had a boost at the daily close yesterday. So, you know, good trading opportunities there. If it's late night, you're bored or whatever, but always the best trading opportunities are, you know, right around market open, which is when we also put in trades for Trade the Chain. We did, you know, see this volatility here, and then there's been, you know, not as much volatility since. So we always put in our best trades in the Trade the Chain community in the morning, so you can tackle them immediately. If you're not in there, definitely go ahead. And then we also have a Twitter Spaces with Aircoins this afternoon at 4:30 Eastern. So join up for that if you're around as well. Good luck, happy trading. See everybody tomorrow.